I'm Nicola Kettlewood, manager of Film Hub Scotland. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a white woman with blonde hair and large blue glasses. I'm here at home in Dunblane rather than in my office at Glasgow Film Theatre. And I'm sitting in a yellow room with a large abstract pink painting behind me. We are grateful to the BFI for their support of these fan conversations, which are an opportunity for the whole fan membership and the wider UK film exhibition sector to come together to discuss the issues of the day. My thanks to my colleagues at Film Hub Scotland and Film Hub South West, who've worked so hard to create this first event. Now that the majority of full-time cinemas have reopened, this is a good time for us to explore how we welcome back our cinema communities, how we reconnect with marginalised audiences, choose which films we will be programming, and look at where hybrid screening models may allow new access for audiences. During the session, please use the chat function to say hello and for any housekeeping. You may need to reset your addressee in the corner to panellists and attendees, as the default setting is just panellists. We'll use the Q&A function to put questions to the panellists as the conversation progresses. After this event, you will receive an email asking you to complete a short survey about today's session. So do let us know how you found it, if it's useful, and if you have suggestions for our next fan conversation. I'm delighted that film critic Wendy is joining us today to chair this first fan conversation. As a critic for Screen and The Observer, Wendy brings her sharp, insightful approach to the week's film releases, so she's brilliantly placed to guide us through a conversation about which films we will offer and how we will welcome audiences now that cinema doors are once again open. I'll pass you over to Wendy now and invite her to introduce our fantastic, knowledgeable panellists. Thank you all so much.
Good afternoon. I'm Wendy Ide. I'm a white woman, middle-aged white woman with dark curly hair. I am in a very bright white room in Cornwall, where I'm currently on holiday with my family. Can I ask my wonderful panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Oliver?
Hello, everyone. I'm Oliver Meek. I'm here in London. And I run the Rio Cinema in Dalston, which is one of London's oldest independent community cinemas. And I'm also currently acting director at the Phoenix Cinema in East Finchley, which is another beautiful old Art Deco cinema. And I've worked in various different independent cinemas for about 15 years, and I'm currently the executive director at both.
Claire Vaughan, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Claire. I'm from Cardiff. I'm sitting in my house at the moment. I'm a white lady, I suppose middle-aged, with purple hair. So I'm the programmer, the cinema programmer at Chapter in Cardiff. We've been going for about 50 years, and excited to be here with everybody today, learn some things.
And Claire Horrocks, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, I'm Claire Horrocks. I'm the film programmer at Exeter Phoenix. We're a multi-arts venue in the centre of Exeter in Devon. I'm a white woman with a very messy, kind of almost blonde bob, and I'm talking here from my dad's office, which is a very traditional office with cream walls and lots of what I would call quite dull pictures in the background, and I'm wearing a chunky cable knit.
And finally, Neil, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Neil Hepburn. I am, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm a white man I'm going to go for mid to late 30s. I am a ginger person also. I'm sitting in my home office where I've been for the last year, over a year now. And I work for Eden Court Highlands, which is a multi-arts venue, the biggest multi-arts venue in Scotland, I believe. I'm their film marketing manager, and I also work as the Scotland coordinator for the BFI New Release Support Scheme, which is designed to support exhibitors to screen a wide range of films with a focus on attracting more diverse audiences to cinemas.
Let's first of all just go around talking about when when you were actually reopened and first impressions on how it's going. Claire, can we start? Claire Vaughan, sorry, there's two Claires. This is going to be complicated.
There was 3 in my class at school, it's fine. I should have said, so my pronouns are she, her, he as well. The first day was really emotional. I don't know how anybody else found it. But I was doing the introductions for all the films. We had 4 screenings that first day. I think I sort of welled up at every single one. It was really hard to kind of keep everything in check, I think. And mainly because the audiences was just so grateful to come back. They were so happy to be back, and to see people kind of like just sitting in the cafe bar, socially distanced, just owning the space again like it was theirs. That was really important to us, and it felt, obviously everything's very different, and I'm not going to use the word it felt normal, exactly, but it felt like people were kind of just reclaiming things again and just happy to be in the space. And so we played Sound of Metal and Nomadland the first week, and everything sold out, every screening. So in Wales the restrictions are slightly different, so it's 2 meter distance in cinemas, so selling out means a very, very different thing to what it did last year. So it's I've got about 40 capacity in my nearly 200 seater and 12 in my nearly 60 seat cinema, so it's very different. But and part of the problem is obviously the seeing everything selling out and then worrying that people are going to go elsewhere because they it's gone really well.
Ollie, when did you open and how's it going?
Yeah, we opened as soon as we could on the 17th. We opened with Nomadland and Sound of Metal. Good choice of programming, Claire. Ditto, it felt quite jubilant in the same way that you see people queuing up for their vaccine and kind of doing selfies. There was a sense of that. Everyone was really excited to return. Which was really, really positive, because I think everyone, certainly among the staff, there was a little sense of trepidation, and I think the audience immediately put everyone at ease because everyone is very comfortable and very, and this is not our first rodeo, as they say. We've been here before, so and we were selling out every night week 1 for Nomadland. So Rio has a very big screen 1, which is 400 seats, and that's down to 131 with social distancing. Still not bad for me. I'll take that. And it was just really nice to be back. Yeah.
And Claire, how's it been for you?
Yeah, I can echo everything that these guys are saying. It was much the same. I think the first screening we had, people were literally skipping into the cinema. It was such a joy to welcome everyone back. And we've had much more daytime screenings than we would pre-COVID, just to make sure we've got enough screenings to make up for that loss of capacity. And so it's been really nice to be around a lot more and around that audience and seeing them arrive. And also we run all our stewards are volunteers, so to be in their presence has been amazing, because they've been so loyal and come straight back and signed up to every film and every screening, and it's just been really lovely to talk to them about what they've missed. And it's just been an absolute joy.
And Neil, how's your experience been?
Yeah, I agree with all of those comments too. It's felt really positive. I would sort of describe it as cautiously hopeful for the future, because I think everybody's a bit kind of apprehensive about all the uncertainty. Our evening screenings have been selling out, which has been brilliant. It is with the caveat, of course, that our main screen is 137 at normal capacity, and that's down to around 34, I think, observing 2 meter social distancing bubbles. And our second screen is 86 down to about 25. So that still feels kind of bruising to me, that even when a screening is sold out, it's what a normally slightly quieter screening might be like, or a kind of mid-level screening. So I cannot wait to get rid of those bubble seating at some point soon. But yeah, everybody's really really happy to be back, and really good at abiding by all of these annoying barriers that we all have to have in place now, like giving details and putting gel on our hands and wearing masks and all that kind of stuff. So there is a spirit of resilience, I think, to the audiences and coming back.
I wanted to ask whether you had anticipated a sort of change in the demographic, whether older people are still more risk averse and avoiding coming, or whether the vaccines have made it open to older audiences as well to come back to the cinema. Ollie, what's your experience on that?
Well, I think the first time around that was going to be that was my impression. That was what I anticipated it would be like, but that hasn't really been the case. I think that of the cinemas I look after, the Rio has a very young demographic and the Phoenix has a much older demographic, but both equally keen to return. And I think older audiences have mostly been vaccinated and are very keen to get out and enjoy themselves, and the same with everyone really. So yeah, I think it's, I don't want to say business as normal, but we've seen very much a spread of audiences returning, which I think is really good, because the real worry is, particularly when you look to diversify your audiences and you do all this work building audiences, that if one chunk of them disappear for any short period of time, it's very hard to then bring those audiences back. So that hasn't been the case, I'm pleased to say.
What about you, Claire, Vaughan? What's your experience? A similar thing?
It's yeah, I mean, with slightly younger audience has been coming in, which is interesting, and so, you know, I mean, we've got an audience. I mean, you know, just like a lot of places in the independent sector, our audience does kind of skew older. But I mean, in Wales, sort of the vaccine rate is a little bit higher anyway. I think it's something like, it's at 75%, I think now. So it's yeah, I think people have just felt generally a bit safer coming in. So I don't know whether that's a reason why it's slightly different, but yeah, I mean, we the regulars have been back, and the regulars came back straight away. But yeah, I think because we're lucky because we've got quite a large cafe bar, and so the people had kind of got into that pattern of coming in for the sort of outdoor dining anyway before that. So I think that kind of helped welcome people back and feel like, you know, maybe it's a place for them, because sort of younger people. So that's my only guess. Obviously, it'd be nice to do some proper research on that as well.
And Neil, I mean, you opened fairly recently, didn't you? What's happened? What's sort of the demographic? Is it the similar kind of demographic that you expected?
Yeah, so we just opened last Wednesday, and definitely going into the pandemic last year, I felt like there was this threat to our core audience that they might never come back, or that we might lose a kind of generation of quite hardcore older cinema goers. And that's just not been the case at all. That's not panned out in any way. I think as soon as a lot of the older generation got double vaccinated, they were desperate to get out and about and get back to the cinema and back to kind of culture and arts. And that's, you know, that's really aligned nicely with Nomadland coming off the back of all its kind of awards dominance and Frances McDormand and whatnot. It's an easy sell in a sense. So it's been really nice that content has lined up in that way, that we're able to kind of ease back in with some of these bigger indie films, and then build back towards a kind of more diverse program again.
And Claire Horrocks, what's your experience? Who's coming to your cinema right now?
Yeah, a real mix actually. We've definitely had a good a lot of our regulars and a lot of older audiences coming back, especially for the daytime screening, which has been great. And you know what? They're the naughtiest. They're terrible at trying to get away with not having their mask on and moving. So they're the ones you've got to watch out for, but they're so nice to welcome back. But we've also seen a lot of students come and see films, which is really great. So we've had a lot of kind of big coming in groups of 6 as well and booking together. I think they've finished their exams, and for a while we were the only cinema in the city showing Nomadland, which was great. So we were getting a good kind of bunch of new people from that, and a lot of people coming by themselves in the day, which has also been nice to see, that they feel safe and comfortable coming to a cinema solo and can just kind of join in and not feel intimidated by that. So I think that we would often get a lot of people coming by themselves, you know, here and there, but to see it much more regularly, it feels like people are, you know, treating themselves, and maybe being on flexi furlough. I don't know if that's made a difference to people having more time in the day, spending it wisely.
Can I just ask, during the lockdown, did you have a kind of offer? Did you maintain a connection with your audiences? I mean, I think this is an interesting thing going forward. Ollie, what did you have going on to keep connected with the audience?
Well, we created an online player. So we thought, you know, as a small independent cinema, we'd go into competition with Netflix and Amazon. Why not? And it kind of came by just out of the circumstances. So one of my staff, Jan, is very adept with tech, and he was able to move some films and create an ad hoc player, and it really snowballed because we had a few special events and a film festival programmed in. We had like Fringe Queer Film Festival, which is normally a very, very big event at the Rio. So last minute we managed to put their films on the player, and it's gone on from there, and we've built it up. Actually, it's been a really, really handy resource for us, and now we look at that as a kind of third screen, and a place to prolong the life of some of the films we show.
Oh, so Ollie, you're looking at hybrid release strategies going forward then?
Yeah, I think we've always done that to an extent, really. I think for independents like us, you have to be very flexible and very adaptable. So our whole model is built around doing lots and lots of events and special screenings wherever we can. And quite often now, for practical reasons, lots of smaller films, they have to go wherever they can get the money, basically. So if they get an online release, they're going to take it, and we don't want to keep those films out of cinema. So we're very happy to work on a flexible model. Obviously, we prefer to have, you know, some exclusivity with bigger films, and I you know, adamantly believe a cinema is the best place to experience a film, 100%. But streaming is here to stay, and it's part of the fabric of films. So why not get a piece of the action if we can?
Claire, Vaughan, I noticed you had a reframed film initiative. Can you talk us through that a little bit and how that helped keep the conversation going?
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, it was a way of dealing with my own anxiety. It was as selfish as that at the start. Sort of when we first went into lockdown, it was like Tuesday, I think, and so everything kind of shut down, and I was kind of like looking at what to watch, and I noticed that there was a Welsh film called Lucky Jim. You know, really, you know, sort of old school Kinkley Amos, you know, Swansea University. And so I was like, you know, we could watch this all at the same time if I tell people, and sort of tried this out. And it was just lovely. I just remember that, you know, we'd all been suddenly stuck in our houses, obviously never happened to us, any of us before. And we were having these lovely conversations it was on Twitter, I think, that I did it, the first one. And yeah, we just had these lovely, lovely conversations, just like between ourselves, like people were sharing memories of like when they'd seen the film with their grandma, and like, you know, of sort of memories of meeting the sort of Kenneth Griffith. And so it was a really, really nice thing. And I started Reframe Film to kind of like just keep that conversation up. And so I was furloughed for a bit, and again channeled my, you know, my anxieties into creating a spreadsheet, which, you know, we're so glamorous in the film industry, aren't we? So I made this big spreadsheet of everything that was available that I could find, just to put it into an order, sort of shared that with other programs around the country. And and we were just sort of doing watch events. It was really nice. And then sort of added things like Zoom discussions afterwards, and that was really, really lovely. The Christmas one particularly was, I noticed that Channel 4 was sort of going to stream or play It's Wonderful Life at exactly the same time we always did it every year in the cinema. And so I kind of got our audience to kind of like join in and watch it, and sort of telling everybody to get some sherries. And because it was that strange Christmas when suddenly everybody gone from like, oh, we've got plans, to, oh, we have to stay in our houses. So yeah, so we're just having this really nice Zoom chat with people in there, kind of like with candles and like with sherries, and like just having a gossip. And it was really nice. And so that absolutely 100% got me through lockdown. Doing that, and it was a really, really lovely thing to do. And we created a player as well, the chapter player, to put our we've got a long running kind of local film showcase called Movie Maker, so we put the chapter Movie Maker on there, and so we've been sort of doing that. And usually Movie Maker happens in a room with 57 people, and we've had like hundreds of people watching these films, so it's 100% definitely going to be something we do in the future. I don't want that to finish. And although we've sort of paused Reframed for it just to get through this reopening bit, I definitely want to continue doing events on there, because it was such a nice thing to be able to connect with people who sometimes just don't come to the cinema for lots of different reasons. So yeah, it was a really nice thing.
And Neil, I know that you had a partnership with the Inverness Film Festival. Can you talk a little bit about what you did during lockdown?
Yeah, sure. So Eden Court runs the Inverness Film Festival, and we didn't really have the capacity to invest in our own player and start a hybrid model last year. It was a bit of an epiphany for me in terms of streaming services, I think, because I realized that cinemas and streaming services weren't completely opposing sort of warring factions, or it didn't have to be that way. And like a lot of other cinemas, we partnered with like the folk at Mubi to give like really good deals to subscriptions for our audiences and whatnot. And like Claire's saying there, that really fed into what I think a lot of people were doing, which was having kind of Zoom film clubs and things like that, and that need for that shared experience was still strong amongst our audiences. But yeah, so we didn't have a player, but we did program a weekend of Inverness Film Festival short films, so films that had screened at the festival over the last 10 years. And we had a sort of mini site created within our website for those. Through some funding from Film Hub Scotland, we were able to kind of package it, provide a little bit of additional content. So we went to the directors of all the films and asked them to record a short intro specifically for this that would only be available through it, which was really nice. And they were obviously in a pandemic not able to do an awful lot, appreciative of like a small amount of a small fee. And it was a good way, I think, to engage in our audiences because we weren't doing the hybrid streaming model. It was like a way of thinking of some kind of distinct content that aligned with our kind of curatorial objectives anyway. So it did feel overwhelming to compete with everything that was happening in terms of streaming, in terms of not just like some really great TV last summer, but also lots of different kind of arts and culture available to watch for free. And so it was quite specific in that sense. And a lot of what we programmed for that actually aligned really nicely with like some big kind of global events that were happening too. We had one film called 1745, which was about Black slaves in the Highlands. And that was a kind of totally unseen, untalked about kind of area for discussion. And it aligned with this kind of global Black Lives Matter movement that we also aligned ourselves with to some degree. We also commissioned some art around that. So yeah, and the viewing figures were actually like, they were good. They were a lot better than I thought they would be. We had more than 4,000 views, and that was 12 films available for one weekend. So yeah, I think it was really positive for keeping our audiences engaged.
And Claire, Horrocks, what was your experience? What did you do to stay connected with your audience during the lockdown?
Yeah, so I think to start with, we were lucky enough to take up some of those subscription offers that we could share with our audience, so they could get, you know, discounted rates on some of the platforms. And then we took some pay-per-view screens and made up like a virtual space which we called the Phoenix Front Room. And we had, because we're a multi-arts venue, we hosted all sorts of different things on there, like quizzes and poetry events and things, and that's where we would put a lot of these films that you could pay per view. And I have to admit, like the having that relationship with Modern Films and some of the other distributors, they were amazing. They couldn't do enough for indie cinemas, and they were so helpful and supportive, and understanding that we were all working to such a reduced capacity. Like I myself was furloughed for a lot of this, so it was down to kind of one member of staff who had to bring all this together, and our marketing team, and they did such a great job. So we didn't do as much as some of the other venues in terms of kind of talking to our audience to start with, just because there wasn't capacity. And some of the kind of virtual release films did well, some did not, but I think it was just that visibility to see that we were still alive and thinking about the fact that audiences want to view things. But it's definitely one thing we have moving forward is thinking about how that hybrid model can exist. And I think we're all on the same boat that that's definitely a way to move forward. So maybe less so from the virtual side, but looking more about how our cinema can be more hybrid. So how we can invite audiences into talks and conversations, and also host talks and conversations where there's no geographical barrier. So I'm starting to see how we can host talent without having to invite them down to Exeter, and look at ways that we can bring them into the cinema for everyone to enjoy and capture that to then make virtual at a later date and things. So we're working on that, which is quite technical, but I think we're nearly there.
Can you go into any more details on that? That sounds interesting.
Well, just making our cinema space much more kind of usable in terms of being able to zoom in talent and then also capture the audience, so the people that are being zoomed in can see our audience. So we're just trying to bring in technology into our cinema to make it usable and user friendly, and ways that we've never been very good at recording our talks and our events and Q&As, and kind of regret it at a later date because we've never had time or the effort to put into it. So it's making us think much more differently about how we archive the work we're doing, because it's really great to see how we can look back and share that with an audience on different platforms, if that's making sense.
Let's talk a little bit about the programming issues that you're facing. I mean, it must be striking a balance between just getting things up and running again, and then also all the audience development work that you've been working so hard on, in the past, making sure that isn't pushed to the side. So Neil, could you talk a little bit about trying to strike that balance? How do you go about that?
Yeah, I think it's difficult because at the moment, I think there is an attitude of just getting things moving again, getting people back into cinemas, getting people feeling comfortable, and that almost lends itself to just programming for broader audiences again. And where are the easy wins? How do we get bums back on seats? How do we get our cinemas operationally running again with people who may have been furloughed for up to a year, and are almost learning a kind of new job to some degree too. I think as well in terms of the work that was being done before in audience development, you're always looking at ways of taking barriers away from people being able to access the cinema and feel comfortable in your building and feel like they're welcome there. It's a space for them, and now it's such a different thing. Like there's more barriers in place now. We're asking people to give us their details. We're asking people to wear masks, and people are coming into the cinemas and they're faced with ushers who are wearing masks, and it's tricky, and everyone's obviously doing their best within that, and it's working. But I think that it is something that is going to be another obstacle for us in terms of access and inclusion issues. And it's important to not lose sight of all those things that we were doing before and kind of carry on that progress and work. On a positive note, we reopened with Sound of Metal, and that was a really great kind of point of focus to be thinking about deaf audiences who I believe are underserved by us and by many other cinemas. I think the fact that the film is hard captioned, you can't see it in a cinema without captions, is a really interesting and kind of provocative statement of intent that makes programmers hopefully look at their programs and say, well, why do we only have one subtitled screening per week or whatever that might be. And so it was great to be able to reopen with that and it kind of bring those issues to the fore again and think, okay, yeah, we need to start this work up once more. But yeah, I think I'm very mindful of new barriers in place and how I think for me, particularly with younger audiences as well, who are a hard one for us. And the fact that I think that the actual like physical environment, the physical space is probably even more intimidating than it was before for them.
Can you just talk a little bit more? I know with Sound of Metal, you actually had, you worked with a deaf woman, didn't you? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So through the BFI New Release Support Scheme, they have pockets of funding that can be small amounts of funding, but that can be used very strategically for every film they support. And so what we did was we commissioned a woman who works in sensory. She's a sensory training manager, I think. Works for the NHS, and I met up with her specifically to talk about how we can reach more deaf organisations. I actually went on the local council website to find out who I could contact, who the contacts would be there. And I got a long list of deaf organisations, and I called everyone and emailed everyone, and every email bounced and every call went dead. And I started to think I was in some strange kind of science fiction thriller. And then I realised, I read the small print in the document, and it was from 2005. And that was the document that was on their website as the way of getting in touch with deaf organisations. Anyway, I found this amazing woman called Amanda Wilson, and we met for a cup of coffee. She'd seen the film on Amazon Prime and had experienced a very similar trajectory to the Riz Ahmed character. She'd gone deaf at 21. She'd been caught between the hearing world and the deaf world. She got cochlear implants, and it just aligned unbelievably well. And she kind of told me her story, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. This would be great if we could, if she wanted to write about this, we could pay her to do it and host this on our website as a blog, and then use it as a focus to bring in deaf groups for Sound of Metal screenings, which is what we did. So the day we reopened, we had a deaf group of 10 attend and a smaller group the next day, which was wonderful.
Claire Vaughan, can I ask you about the same thing, getting that balance between programming, just getting people back in, and also, the curatorial objectives that you have?
Yeah, I mean, it is really difficult because, just like Neil said, it's at the moment, it's just kind of like, you just kind of get the gears moving, and it's just as simple as that. You just need to get people back into the swing of things. But at the same time, I mean, I was kind of determined not to kind of let some of the some of the great work that we've been doing before it sort of like fall apart. So I mean, I've actually increased the number of caption screenings we do a day. We were doing we've only got 2 screens, and we were doing sort of 3 a week usually. Like, I was trying to do 3 a week, and even that was like much more than we'd done kind of like 10 years before that. And now it's like there's at least 1 a day, sometimes 2 a day. And the thing that I'm most concerned about, though, is well, we were doing dementia-friendly screenings. We had a really great programme of dementia-friendly screenings, and obviously that's nothing we can do at the moment. So we were sort of bringing care homes in and sort of having screenings in chapter and having tea and coffee events. And it was one of my loveliest events of the month, just sort of sitting around chatting to people. And so obviously I've been thinking about that audience a lot during lockdown, and knowing that we're going to have to start that work all over again, because all of our contacts would have changed from the work we were doing previously. Obviously the families have been massively affected, so it's so that's really worrying. But I mean, I'm sort of still doing at least 1 relaxed screening a week as well, so I'm sort of trying to ease our audience back in. But it is at the moment we're sort of doing things that aren't kind of budget heavy. They're kind of in a sense the sort of things that I can build into the programme, rather than it being I've got additional capacity to do it, because I just don't at the moment, and we've got such a small team, and there's no money to go around. I mean, we're applying again for the Cultural Recovery Fund that's sort of opened in Wales, so we're sort of yet to hear back about that, because obviously the money, the Cultural Recovery Fund money went up until April, and then we're still in restrictions. So it's until we're a bit more secure with that, it's really difficult to try and make sure that we've got enough budget and capacity to be able to do some of those things. But yeah, I mean, curatorially and sort of programming, it's I kind of feel a real responsibility to make sure that that we do much more than we were doing before, even to make sure that we're reaching different audiences, we're reaching I mean, broad audience is a difficult thing to say, because it's like, when we say broad, we generally mean just like more and like kind of like safer. And I think our programming is got kind of riskier since lockdown. I mean, partly because it's those bigger films, you can't rely necessarily on the larger distributors to. I mean, there was talk of there being lots of flexibility and like much better deals, but it hasn't been the case as far as I've seen. It's the smaller distributors, just like Claire said with modern films, been wonderful. I'm really excited to see some of their releases, and so I've been purposely trying to book the smaller distributors, because they supported us through lockdown. I want to sort of try and help them out now we're opened.
Ollie, can we talk a little bit about your experience of just balancing getting the bums on the seats, and then also continuing your offer, your unique offer that you have at your cinemas?
Yeah, it's really challenging. So I think once again, shout out to the Culture Fund for making us even be able to think about this, because obviously we pride ourselves on being a community cinema, and to reach different and diverse audiences, it means you've got to be accommodating. It means you've got to open more, you've got to open early, you've got to open late, you've got to put on more screenings, and all of these things cost money, and you have to be prepared to do screenings at a loss to reach these audiences. That's part of our remit. That's why we do what we do. That's we're comfortable with that. And normally in years we'll balance the books by when we get a big film like Parasite, or we get a big film like Joker, we'll make our money then, and that's how we balance the books. We don't get any funding to support that community work. So now what we don't want to do is take away all of that work and lose those audiences that we've spent years, growing and cultivating. But at the same time, it's difficult. I was talking with a colleague yesterday about bringing back mother and baby screenings, really want to bring those back, or parent and baby screenings, obviously. But all of the parents who brought their children were under one, 2 years ago. Those children are all too old now. So we rely on kind of word of mouth and everything to get that message out there. The same with our classic matinee. We work with all the local care homes. We have no way of reaching a lot of those older people who come to dementia-friendly screenings. They don't have email. They just knew that the screenings were the third Wednesday of every month, and they would turn up. And we're desperate to get that work started again. So I think once things are up and running again, that's something I hope to liaise with other colleagues in cinemas and talk with the hubs about bigger strategies, because I think I'm really proud of the work that we've done at the Rio, and lots of cinemas have done. They're really, really valuable community assets, and that's why people are so excited to come back. And I don't think people always see that in the bigger picture when they think about blockbuster films. There's a lot of community focused work. So we have to make sure we can maintain that even after the funding has gone, because if we lose that, then really we have lost our identity.
And Claire, Horrocks, would you mind just talking a little bit about your balance between just getting people in and your work as a community resource?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can hear everyone saying it does feel like you're starting again, and certainly reaching out to organisations and groups and things. There's a lot of auto replies and a lot of people working on a reduced capacity, so it's really hard to get to the right people when you're doing outreach. And also there's still a little bit of a concern with some organisations reluctant to kind of promote indoor events to their network, I'm finding. So when we've had a few screenings and we're reaching out to different charities and things, they don't feel that they are prepared to do that. So that's something we're kind of working our way through. And in terms of programme, I think we're quite lucky as a cinema, because a lot of our programme does focus on specialised cinema, and that's always been what we're about. So, and there's so many strong, amazing indie films that are making their way out that I feel we've been quite lucky, and it's been relatively easy to make those choices. And even Nomadland, traditionally that wouldn't be a title that should have been as big as it was, perhaps. But obviously it's such a great film, and and things like First Cow and all the other ones that are coming up, and it's making the job a pleasure in terms of programming films. So some of those things aren't necessarily a barrier. We've been quite lucky. We've been doing some work with the distributor Dobworth as well. So we're one of the venues that they've been focusing on with some of their kind of British releases and getting regional audiences interested in documentary. So that's put us in a really great position and allowed us to think about how we reach out and promote films case by case, and speak to people and get visible, get into people's inboxes. So even if they don't necessarily respond first time, then it becomes a bit more familiar as we go. And we've also been doing a lot of work. We were really lucky to get some money from the BFI for some outreach work that we've been doing, kind of about inclusivity and outreach for younger audiences. So we're kind of midway through this project, which has been quite a challenge to do while everyone's in lockdown. So that's been something we've been able to keep doing, not as easy as we hoped it would be in terms of reaching people, but the aim was to strengthen our visibility kind of with 18 to 25-year-olds, and find better ways to kind of focus on those underrepresented audiences, which is something we've not really had time to do. So we've been working with a really great outreach coordinator, Sophia Berry, who's Bristol based, and she's been working tirelessly kind of developing partnerships with organisations in the area and asking questions about us and kind of delving into the kind of world of what we're doing right and wrong. And we're just about to start the second phase of that, which is reaching out to young people who are going to help build a strategy and feed into how we're going to better our way at doing what we do. So I'm hoping that we are still going to be able to do that without too many kind of restrictions in place. It's definitely a balancing act, I think.
I've got a question from one of the participants. In fact, can I just take this moment to encourage people to ask your own questions, join in this conversation through the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. But I have a question from Alison Smith, who is Equalities and Diversity Officer at Creative Scotland and Access Coordinator at the Swift Festival. And she says, I have a question on the impact of social distancing and supporting audiences that need additional support or guidance, particularly in terms of disabled access. How is that working out? Neil, would you mind telling me how it's working out for you?
Yeah, I mean, well, no, actually, I'm unable to give any kind of feedback on that, I'm afraid. I've not dealt with it since we reopened last week. I mean, everything we have in place from before is still in place. We're fully accessible, and we'll do everything we can there. So yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a specific kind of post-COVID. I mean, I think for me, it kind of relates back, and I guess if we're talking operationally within the building, that's something else. But I think that one of the things that has been flagged up for me is that we, when we're talking about hybrid models before, that's something that hadn't occurred to me pre-COVID, but now we have people shielding whatnot who can't get back to the cinema. So in terms of asking who we're able to provide for, that's something that needs addressed. But yeah, sorry, Alison, that's not the answer you're looking for.
Does anyone have any actual feedback that they've had to deal with disabilities and access issues? Raise your hand if you have.
Well, we've had quite a few customers with accessibility needs coming as normal, and I think one thing, kind of the reverse is true. In fact, because we have more staff and we're more focused on spacing, we're probably better positioned to help, to help assist people with any needs, because people are much more respectful of space, and we're taking more time to get people into screenings and out again. But again, yes, it is very early days, but that's an important, I mean, if social distancing continues beyond June the 21st, and who knows whether it will or not, I think it's really important to do surveys among audiences and just look and see how everyone is finding it, because we haven't really had the time to reflect too much on it. We've just had to adapt very quickly.
I've got another question. This one's from Mark Cosgrove, and I think this is on a lot of people's minds. Actually, there's another question that's similar. How are people managing the possibilities of upcoming government announcements, and the question over dropping social distancing? Obviously, we're specifically talking about England, but I mean, there is a lot of uncertainty. How are people planning for this? Who would like to take that? Claire?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those things. I mean, we in terms of our programming, we used to program it kind of a month in advance, and because everything has to go to translation, we were quite programming quite far in advance, like about 6 to 8 weeks, and that's completely changed. So we're programming much quicker now. It's like kind of fortnightly. So I just signed off the sort of till the 25th of June. I'll be doing the next 2 weeks afterwards. So it does mean that we're kind of a little bit more responsive. Obviously a lot more responsive than we used to be, and so we're just kind of having to just sit back and wait and see what happens. I mean, in Wales, it's, like I say, things are different in terms of we haven't got the 21st of June. That's not a date in Wales that we're working towards. It's a kind of like that we're working to the figures rather than to the to dates in Wales. So we haven't got any reassurance that anything's going to be changing on the 21st. But there's hopes, obviously. But with things, being the way they are, it's one of those situations where it's kind of we're thinking it might not be till July maybe in Wales, and we kind of like just have to keep going. I mean, like I say, if there's any more cultural recovery fund money, that would be incredibly useful. Not saying we're relying on that too much, but we kind of have to be, because it's like so completely different to the sort of numbers we were having sort of 2 years ago. So it's it is just that I think we just have to be responsive, and it's really hard to do that, because we all love planning, we all love to kind of have something we're working towards, but it's I mean, in terms of releases, obviously some things are moving around, and some of the bigger films are kind of like they push back to right into the autumn anyway, so I think people are kind of playing it safe a little bit, but there's such a bottleneck anyway of films at the moment, so it's kind of I kind of feel quite confident that we'll have stuff to play, even if it won't be kind of as big as Nomadland, but there'll be stuff to play. We've got the last year of releases that I want to show in the cinema, so that's not a problem I think we're going to necessarily have. But yeah, I mean, it's in terms of surviving as long as we are as with the restrictions, we just want to open up as soon as we can, but then there's more questions then about like do we just drop the restrictions completely, because at the moment it's 4 seats. Do we I'm thinking it might just be safe to put 1 seat between people, and once, even if we have no restrictions, that might make people feel safer. So yeah, there's lots of kind of questions on that, but I think it's just to kind of like just sit and allow things to just potentially change at any time, which is awful, horrible, but just the way you've got to do it, I think.
Ollie, how are you dealing with this uncertainty? I mean, I notice films are changing around all the time. Censor just dropped out of the schedule. It was meant to be in a couple of weeks' time, and I imagine that's a title that would have been one that you would have shown. How are you dealing with it?
Well, it's a case of whose behaviour is going to be more predictable. Is it going to be Boris Johnson's, or is it going to be film distributors? So kind of being caught between the two in terms of making a decision. It's really difficult. I think but just before we reopened, there was the announcement for the Prime Minister the Monday before. So up until that point, I've been saying to everyone, I'm not booking anything in beyond the end of May until we've got confirmation of that. And then, of course, we got confirmation, and I got like 900 emails the next day asking if we could confirm every single event. So I'm not going to do that again. So I am tentatively putting things in there, but trying to leave space. I think the big problem for us is we have 2 screens, a very big one and a very small one. And if we get all our ducks in a row and suddenly someone moves Bond again, the whole thing is scuppered. And there are certain things we will work around, but certain films like The French Dispatch, Bond, Dune, if we don't play them, we will go bust. Basically, we have to play those 4 films to recover. So I'm hoping that once social distancing is relaxed, with the success of Nomadland, distributors will feel a bit more confident in those dates. And I understand. I'm not criticizing them. Obviously, these films have huge budgets and are massive assets, and they want to get the most money out of them, as do we do. But we do need a bit more of a roadmap to build around. Otherwise, we're just putting people off all the time.
Yeah, that sort of flexibility of approach, it clearly impacts on the sort of finessing that you can do on a smaller film and the release of a smaller film. So Claire, Horrocks, how are you dealing with the uncertainty?
Yeah, much like Claire. Yeah, so we're programming much closer to we have ever before, and I'm getting in the habit of leaving gaps and things so we can slot things in where there's audience demand and things. So that's helping us kind of in the immediate. The biggest trouble we're having is with we do a big outdoor cinema event in the summer in August, and just bringing that together is proving quite tricky with getting the right titles and getting people to commit, because the kind of different companies that we work with don't want to book anything in or confirm their position until they know they're able to, all those kind of outdoor restrictions have been lifted. So that's becoming quite tricky, and then getting the right time that we can announce to our audience that it's happening, because they're kind of asking if it is happening. So that's proving quite tricky, and then that kind of ties in with the last question about that balancing act of the right films and making sure we've got films that we should be showing as an independent venue, but also that get those bums on seats, so it's worth doing. So that's kind of the biggest challenge, I think, right now. Is that
I've got one other question from an attendee whose name I don't know. They say, has this time changed your programming strategy or ideas at all? Do you still think there's space for rep programming and thematic seasons at your venues? Neil, would you mind taking that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's space. As we kind of mentioned earlier, I think the sooner we move away from an idea of like just getting cinemas going again, the better. I mean, obviously that's important, and that's a hurdle that's been crossed now for any cinema that's open. For us, we had a kind of soft launch when we reopened, and it is just, you know, kind of testing the waters the next few weeks. We're programming 2 weeks in advance right now. It is kind of day at a time, still feels like that kind of building on sand thing. But yeah, absolutely. I think those things have to come back. I mean, they're the things that we've been doing for a long time at Eden Court and have been really popular in the past too. I think the thing that's getting in the way of it all, again, is the kind of restrictions on capacity and things like that at the moment. So there is a risk that if there's something more ambitious we want to program in terms of a season or a one-off, and you know, financially, if that can't balance out with the number of people we can get in for it, then that's not going to happen. Which is just why we've got to keep our fingers crossed that, you know, things change soon, because I feel at the moment there's this real sense of absurdity to it that you can't, in Scotland, you can't go to the cinema with anyone from another household and sit within a bubble closer than 2 meters apart. Yet afterwards, you could go to the pub and meet up with, you know, at least 6 different households and sit on a small table and kind of spit in each other's faces. So I think that it does feel like you know, arts venues are being shat on a little bit at the moment.
I just wondered if any of you have any kind of business strategies or fundraising strategies to keep afloat, because obviously, you know, you're at the sharp end financially. If the restrictions remain in place, do you have any kind of a cushion financially, or are you hoping for more support from the government? Ollie, would you mind taking that one?
No financial cushion, sadly. We'll be relying on filming and hires and so on. We are trialling the rule of 6 ticket, 6 seats for £60 to encourage people to come in bubbles, because obviously the problem is if we lose the same amount of seats for 1 person booking as we do for 6. So if we can encourage people, they're allowed to come in bubbles and groups to come in 6, that will change the figures slightly. I think in some ways it's been a useful exercise, because we've really had to analyze the business and look at anywhere where we can generate more income and be as entrepreneurial as we possibly can. So there are upsides from that, but we just, I mean, we're an industry about audiences. We need to get audiences back to the maximum. That's what everyone wants, and once we can do that safely, I think there will be a really positive recovery. But in the meantime, it's going to be very difficult, because without the Culture Fund money, I think a lot of us would be gone by now. And that lasts up to a certain period, and things have been okay so far, but we need some return to normality quickly.
Claire, can I just ask you, Claire Horrocks, sorry, can I just ask you, about how you feel you've been supported by the industry, because I think I had a brief chat with you earlier, and you mentioned that you felt that the industry had pulled together in a way. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, lots of different places. I mean, because we're a multi-arts venue, so we were supported through the Arts Council in terms of the kind of the Cultural Recovery Fund, and we were well looked after there. I think we are okay. For this period, I think come autumn it's going to be a little bit trickier as we're kind of left on our own. But I mean, there's been support from all different places. I mean, in terms of distributors, generally most distributors have been outstanding and really supportive and willing to see things from our perspective. They're kind of helping us find the best lots for the films. I feel like in terms of getting assets from distributors, that seems much stronger than ever before. I think there's definitely that support. And also in terms of, you know, this is the perfect example. This is this event in itself. And I know Claire and I have been present in a few different kind of discussions like this. Bird's Eye View have been doing some amazing work with women working in film, and that's just been incredible in terms of building a network of other distributors and other programmers and just people that I feel I can now reach out to if I have a question without being a stranger to them and asking. There doesn't seem to be any such thing as a stupid question anymore or anything. So I feel like it's almost like starting again as that film programmer when I was, 10 years ago, whatever. It's great. I feel like there's somewhere to go to get help and support and advice, or someone can pass you on. And those little niches of support for different parts of audience outreach is existing in a way that I didn't know it did before. So that's definitely a massive silver lining. I don't know if everyone else feels a similar vibe.
Yeah, let's talk about silver linings. Claire, Vaughan, do you have anything you can add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just echoing everything Claire said. I mean, it's been really interesting having a real support network. There was a WhatsApp group that was started right at the start of lockdown, and we can just ask a question straight away. Like somebody will get back with an answer, or just like kind of commiserating together on when the other lockdowns happened, and it does feel like suddenly we've kind of all come together. And some of it is felt like, so incredibly supportive. It does feel like as an industry, we kind of have changed, like in some way, in a really, really positive way. And so I think, and a part of this work, obviously, with there's lots of sort of diversity toolkits, and there's a brilliant one on inclusive cinema that was released by Sadia Hamid. And so there's a lot of work, I think, that's been going on sort of behind the scenes, obviously with sort of world events and things anyway. And it feels that people have been more receptive to listening to that. I think it's just going to be kind of checkers in a year's time and see how much work we've actually been able to do. But it does feel like suddenly everybody's really open to having conversations and sort of feeling a bit sort of humbled and just willing to try different things, to try and experiment with what was we had before actually really wasn't working for everybody, and so we can build up better. So let's just try and do that. So that there's a real tangible feel to that at the moment, I think.
And Ollie, do you have a silver lining you can talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think cinema is an ecosystem. Admittedly, we kind of feel like the bottom feeder in that ecosystem a lot of the time, but we all, cinema needs to be the winner out of this. We want people to go back to cinemas. We're not competitors anymore. We're all here for the same unified thing. And I just hope that in a year's time, we do remember this and we keep that fairness and that flexibility, because the structure before wasn't quite right in terms of, we need to remember that the reason that our venues have survived is because people love them and people want to support them. So let's not forget that.
And Neil, let's end with you. I think we're nearly out of time, but do you have a silver lining as well?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I agree with everything that Claire and Ollie said there, and I think that those changes have been positive. For me, I think one of the big silver linings is that the pandemic kind of gave everyone a bit more space to think about how the world is structured, how interconnected we all are. I think that awareness around the climate crisis increased as a result of that. And I think that certainly in the case of Eden Court, something really interesting that's happening now is that there's much more conversations around that going on about our recovery from the COVID pandemic being a green recovery, looking at how we're doing things, having stopped overnight taking print marketing and producing brochures and things like that, wondering if there's other ways of doing that, looking at the energy we use in our building, looking at our programming and how it contributes to all of that. And that, I think, has come really as a direct result of realizing when the venue itself was closed, what we could be for the community, and how we still needed to serve the community, and how we're kind of for the community. And so I would say that's an exciting thing. I think there's an exciting opportunity for arts venues to lead on that. And I think one of the big challenges that comes alongside that is bringing our audiences with us, because I think it's going to be a big change for everyone.
I think that's a really positive note to end on. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you for all the participants who are watching us. And do keep engaging. Thank you so much, and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks to Wendy Ide and our panellists Claire Vaughan, Neil Hepburn, Ollie Meek and Claire Horrocks for their fascinating conversation there. Although this is a time of great challenges for the sector, it was reassuring to hear about sell-out screenings, different programming and pricing models, and ways that venues are working to ensure that all audiences are welcome and provided for now that the doors are finally open again. We hope that you found this session useful. Please let us know what you thought using the evaluation form below, and please sign up for our mailing list for details of the next fan conversation. We'll see you soon. Thank you.